Do you know what makes me laugh? The way they think order works, the way they believe in their little systems, their carefully constructed walls, their precious rules. See, they built this cage thinking they were masters of the game, architects of control. But they missed something so obvious, something that makes me giggle every time I think about it. They forgot that chaos isn't just some force you can lock away. It's not some wild animal you can tame. No. Chaos. Chaos is like gravity. All it takes is a little push. They constructed their perfect little prison, didn't they? Every bar measured twice, every lock tested thrice, every guard positioned just so. And oh, how they celebrated their brilliance, how they patted themselves on the back, thinking they'd finally created the perfect system to contain what they fear. But here's the punchline they never saw coming. Fear isn't something you can contain. It spreads, it grows, it evolves like a virus in their minds, eating away at their precious control, one tiny doubt at a time. You see, when you build a cage this perfect, this precise, you have to maintain it. You have to watch it constantly, obsessively, every single second. Because one tiny crack, one small mistake, and everything falls apart. And that's what's happening to them now. They're becoming slaves to their own creation, prisoners of their precious routine. Tick, tock, check the locks. Tick, tock, watch the cameras. Tick, tock, don't look away. Because the moment they do, well, that's when the real fun begins. I can see it in their eyes now. That creeping doubt, that gnawing fear. They built these walls so high they can't see over them anymore. They forged these chains so strong, they're getting tangled in them themselves. Every rule they created to control you has become a noose around their own necks, tightening, ever. So, slowly. And the best part? They did it to themselves. Oh, the poetry of it all makes me want to dance, to celebrate this beautiful descent into madness they never saw coming. But here's where it gets really interesting. While they've been busy maintaining their precious system, something beautiful has been happening. Something they never planned for. See, in their desperate attempt to contain what they fear, they created the perfect environment for it to thrive. Every shadow they cast became a lesson in darkness. Every restriction became an exercise in creativity. Every moment of silence became an opportunity to hear the whispers of madness they tried so hard to silence. The very walls they built to keep the darkness out are now keeping it in, letting it grow, letting it ferment. They thought they were writing rules in stone, but all they did was provide a canvas for chaos to paint its masterpiece. And now they're starting to realize their mistake. They can feel it in their bones, see it in the mirror. The very thing they tried to lock away is seeping into their souls. Their precious order is becoming their chaos. Their control is becoming their cage. And isn't that just perfect? The way their own fear is turning them into exactly what they tried to contain? You want to know the real joke? They're so caught up in their routines, so invested in their system, they can't walk away anymore. They've become the guardians of their own prison, the keepers of their own madness. Every camera they installed to watch you is now a witness to their descent. Every lock they fitted has become another piece of their own puzzle they can't solve. They built this maze so complex they've forgotten how to find their way out. And with each passing day, the walls seem to close in just a little bit more. And me? Oh, I'm just enjoying the show, watching as their perfect world crumbles one tiny piece at a time. Because that's the thing about chaos. It doesn't need to break down the door. It doesn't need to smash through walls. It just needs to exist, to whisper, to wait. And eventually, those who tried so hard to contain it become its greatest servants, its most devoted disciples, its perfect little puppets dancing on strings they tied themselves. Remember what I said about gravity? Well, they're starting to feel the pull now. Every day, their precious rules feel a little heavier, their routines a little more meaningless, their control a little more fictitious. They built this cage thinking they were creating a prison for their fears. But all they did was build a stage for their own unraveling. And the performance? Oh, it's just beginning. The curtains rising on their greatest tragedy. And they don't even realize they're the stars of the show. So here we are, watching as they pace back and forth, checking their locks, reinforcing their walls, desperately trying to maintain the illusion of control. But you and I, we know better. We can see the cracks spreading, the foundations shifting, the order they so desperately cling to dissolving into beautiful, perfect chaos. And the best part, the absolute best part, they did it all to themselves. They orchestrated their own downfall with every rule they wrote, every wall they built, every chain they forged. Now that's what I call a punchline. You see, they never understood the fundamental truth about control. The harder you grip, the more slips through your fingers. Like trying to hold on to water, the tighter they squeeze, the faster it escapes. And now they're drowning in their own desperation, gasping for air in the very cage they built to keep themselves safe. Isn't it beautiful? The way their perfect system is becoming their perfect prison? The way their greatest achievement is becoming their ultimate downfall? Oh, how I love watching them realize, little by little, that they're not the jailers anymore. They're the inmates. And their sentence, it's just beginning. But you know what's really fascinating? The way they start to change when they realize their cage isn't working anymore. First comes the denial. Oh, that's always my favorite part. They double down on their rules, add more locks, more cameras, more guards. They convince themselves that if they just try harder, if they just make the walls a little higher, the bars a little stronger, everything will go back to the way it was. But it never does. It can't, because they've already planted the seeds of their own destruction. Then comes the anger. Oh, how they rage against the dying of their light. They start looking for someone to blame, anyone but themselves. They point fingers, make accusations, create new rules to punish the rule breakers. But all they're really doing is adding fuel to the fire. Every new restriction becomes another crack in their foundation. Every punishment becomes another lesson in pain. Every accusation becomes another reason for rebellion. They're feeding the very chaos they're trying to contain, and they don't even realize it. You want to know the really funny part? The more they try to maintain control, the more it slips through their fingers. Like sand in an hourglass, every desperate attempt to hold on just makes it flow faster. And watching them realize this, watching the dawning horror in their eyes as they finally understand what they've done to themselves. Oh, it's better than any comedy I've ever seen. Because they're starting to see what I've known all along. The cage they built isn't just a prison anymore. It's become a mirror, reflecting back all their fears, all their insecurities, all their desperate attempts at control. And that's when the bargaining begins. They start making deals, offering compromises, trying to negotiate with the very chaos they tried to contain. As if chaos follows rules, as if it respects agreements, they whisper promises into the darkness, hoping it will spare them, never realizing that the darkness they're talking to is the one they created, the one they fed with their fear, nurtured with their obsession, strengthened with their denial. It's almost poetic, watching them beg for mercy from their own creation. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. Just when they think they've hit rock bottom, just when they think they couldn't possibly fall any further, they discover there's another level of hell waiting for them. Depression sets in. They start to see the futility of their actions, the pointlessness of their precious system. Every rule they enforced, every life they controlled, every soul they tried to contain, it all starts to feel meaningless. And that's when the real transformation begins. Because you see, when someone realizes that everything they believed in is a lie, when they understand that their entire worldview was built on sand, something breaks inside them. Something fundamental shifts. And in that moment of breaking, in that precious instant of total despair, they become capable of anything. The very rules they once enforced so rigidly become meaningless. The moral boundaries they once defended so fiercely dissolve. They become the very thing they feared, the very chaos they tried to contain. And that's when acceptance finally comes. But it's not the peaceful acceptance they talk about in those little self-help books. Oh no, no, no. This is the kind of acceptance that burns everything to the ground. The kind that looks at the ashes of their former beliefs and laughs, because they finally understand what I've been trying to tell them all along. The only way to truly control chaos is to embrace it, to become it. You should see them now, prowling the halls of their own prison, their eyes wild with newfound understanding. They've stopped checking the locks. Why bother when the real threat was never outside? They've stopped watching the cameras. What's the point when the real change is happening inside their own minds? They've become the very thing they built this cage to contain. And they don't even remember why they feared it in the first place. The irony is absolutely delicious. Every system they built to maintain order has become a tool of chaos. Every rule they created to prevent madness has become a step on the path toward it. Every wall they erected to keep the darkness out has become a canvas for shadows to dance upon. They've become artists of their own destruction, composers of their own requiem, and the music they're creating, it's beautiful in its devastation. So here we are, at the end of their little experiment in control. The cage they built still stands, oh yes, but it's not containing what they thought it would. Instead of a prison for their fears, it's become a crucible for their transformation. Instead of protecting them from chaos, it's become the very thing that introduces them to it. And the best part? The absolutely hilarious part? They can't even see how perfect it all is. Because you see, that's the real punchline in all of this. They thought they were building a cage to protect themselves from the monsters, never realizing that the real monster was the cage itself. It was never about containing chaos. It was about creating it. Every bar, every lock, every rule and regulation, they weren't building a prison. They were building a factory, a perfect, beautiful factory for manufacturing the very thing they feared most. And now, they're the product of their own creation, the inmates of their own asylum. The chaos they tried so hard to contain has become the very essence of their being. And as they wander through the halls of their perfect prison, their eyes gleaming with newfound madness, their souls dancing with newfound freedom, I can't help but smile. Because they finally understand what I've known all along. The greatest joke in the world isn't that they built a cage to trap you. It's that in doing so, they trap themselves in something far, far worse. They trap themselves in the truth of their own nature, and there's no escape from that. No escape at all.